普通に流れてく日常に無理して馴染ませた沈んじまった個性たちを噛んで飲んで吐いて笑うこんな僕を分かってほしい言いたいけど言えなくてなんて誰も分かってくんないのと思うのは贅沢なのかななのかな感情的な太陽は熱を上げすぎてどうにかなりそう
Hello everybody and welcome back to Manga of the Week, the edutainment show in which I read a manga and then tell you guys all about it. This week we're going to lean a little bit more into the educational side of things because I've chosen a manga that's a bit older and a different format than most manga readers are used to. As some of you know, I'm a fairly recent convert to both anime and manga. I really only started watching anime in 2017 and only reading manga even more recently in like 2019, 2020, and I haven't had a chance to read or watch as much famous things to completion as maybe I should. However, I finally got around to reading this week's manga of the week, and it is every bit worth the reputation that it has. Azumanga Daioh is an incredibly famous manga that does not need my recommendation at all, but as I have finally gotten around to reading it, I want to recommend it to you guys. This notorious yonkoma, or 4-panel style manga, is an incredible marriage of both Japanese manga and traditional American comic strips. As you will see, the way yonkoma lays out the 4 panels is vertical rather than the most often seen horizontal layout that you'll get from something like Peanuts in the Sunday comics. Yonkoma has a pretty rich tradition in Japanese history, especially as far as cross-cultural influences go, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time today explaining that history. For the kind of origins of yonkoma, we have to go all the way back to 1895, and the man that is considered by some to be the founder of modern manga. In 1895, a young man by the name of Kitazawa Yusuji studied under the famous Australian artist and illustrator Frank Arthur Nankerville. Nankerville was a pioneer in illustrative comics, who later moved to America to work for Puck magazine, the magazine which is most famous for kind of popularizing American comic strips. The influence of Nankerville and other American cartoonists is very prevalent in Kitazawa's work, and once he moved to the Jiji Shinpo newspaper, he there crafted the first yonkoma manga, Jiji manga. Yonkoma itself has a structure, kind of like poetry does or short stories, meter and rhyme-esque. This structure is called Kishotenketsu, and I'm probably butchering that word, but I'm doing my best, which is a word formed by the different kanji characters describing said structure. Ki, wherein the first panel sets the scene. Sho, where the second panel builds off of the establishment in the first. Ten, wherein the climax and an oftentimes unforeseen circumstance occurs and changes the flow of things. And Ketsu, wherein the fourth panel shows the aftermath of the third and the conclusion of the whole thing. So yes, Ki Shoten Ketsu. Yonkoma itself naturally lends itself to humor, and has been utilized for that most of its life. Manga such as Lucky Star, Ojo Jojo, Working, Tomo-chan wa Onanako, and of course Azumanga Daioh are prime examples of classic humorous yonkoma. Azumanga Daioh itself is a masterclass in humor, with its excellent command of physical humor, facial expressions, comedic timing, and sometimes brief absurdist notes. It covers a story of 6 girls on their 3-year journey through high school, and the highs, lows, triumphs, and struggles that are contained therein. While it's not like some manga I read where there's some grand design or story, it's more popular and influential for I struggle to say it, but inherent goodness, and I'll try my best to explain it with the scale. Story, I'm giving a 7 out of 10. Like I was saying, this story isn't really anything super special. It's a comedic slice of life in every sense of the word. Being as this manga was written from 1999 to 2003, I believe, it has some dated references and humor, but it conversely isn't permeated by a lot of the slice of life tropes that came about soon afterwards. With all of this taken into consideration, this story does stand out, particularly in a satisfactory sense. And what I mean by that is this manga is a full 3-year exploration of these girls' lives, meaning you get to see from the start of high school to the end of high school in its entirety, even though it is in somewhat snapshot form. There are gaps in the timeline and all of that stuff, but getting to see these girls going from not being friends to their budding friendship to going through all of the craziness of high school together, leaning on each other, clashing with each other, all of that stuff, and getting to see it come to its natural conclusion is incredibly satisfying. That kind of complete experience of their coming of age is what makes Azumanga Daioh so good in my opinion. Characters, I'm giving a 7.5 out of 10. Obviously, you can't have this kind of a story without there being good characters, and Azumanga has plenty. From the cool beauty Sakaki, who admires all things fluffy and cute despite her demeanor, to the 10-year-old genius Chiyo, who just wants to get along with her older peers, and the lovable, energetic idiot in Tomo. All of the girls have a very unique identity, not only in the group, but individually, which I always will praise in any manga, and you hear me say it a lot. These kind of unique identities not only work well with each other, but with the other two main characters, that being the homeroom teacher and the PE teacher. And all of their interactions just come together to make the characters much more memorable than they would be on their own, or in some other kind of story, I'd even say. All of these characters kind of seem to create and subvert their own tropes on a nearly monthly basis. But therein kind of lies the beauty in the simplicity, because even though some of them look very similar art-wise, I think of mainly Tomo and Osaka, they get kind of confusing art-wise. Their personalities are so different, and the dialogue is so snappy and ensures that you know who's talking at all times, that despite the downfall of that art difference, you always know who they are. Speaking of that, I'm going to go into art, which I'm giving a 5.5 out of 10. This score kind of seems harsh and low, and maybe it is. I am, of course, comparing it to the breadth of other manga and other types of manga that I've read, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should put it in its own form, because it is more of a outside influenced manga. It is more simplistic, and it was serialized on a shorter basis, and frankly it isn't about the art so much as it is the dialogue. It's a very dialogue heavy thing, even though a lot of the jokes are very short and punchy because it is a 4-panel comic. Most of these 4 panels are laid out very simplistically. There are 1 to 3 characters talking per panel with some very simple background or prop that is necessary to establish just context. And of course, that simplicity doesn't lend itself to fantastic feats of art. However, the score is boosted heavily by the amazing physical and facial expressiveness that all of the characters portray. The art style itself is very humorous. You can very clearly see, because of how exaggerated they are, all of the emotions that they are possibly feeling in the moment. And all of that just, I'm gonna stop talking. Location, I'm giving a 3 out of 10. This is of course another harsh and low score, but again, it's not to turn y'all off of it that I'm giving it such a low score. It's genuinely just, it's not about that. This manga isn't about that, and that's okay. It's not so much about the art and location, it's about the characters, and that is fine. I'm not turned off by that at all. However, if I have to quantify location, it gets a 3 out of 10 because there are 3 locations in this, and only 2 of them are named, and that is Chiyo's house and Chiyo's summer house. The school that they spend 3 years of their lives at, and we spend the entire time reading about, is never named. The entire high school doesn't have a name, and that's okay, but 3 out of 10. Emotional impact, I'm giving a 5 out of 10. This manga really isn't meant to grip your heart and tug at your sympathetic side or anything like that. It doesn't have a lot of complex emotions. It does, however, have some pretty complex characters, and that's where it makes up for that. It's meant to be a pretty fun romp through a straightforward coming of age story, and again, that's not a downside. That is just how this manga is. The manga does do a good job of kind of warming your heart as you see, like I said, these characters come to know each other, grow together, and help each other through all of what high school has to offer. Even the teachers learn and grow from their students and become friends with them. They learn over the course of the manga to love each other even through their numerous differences, and the bittersweetness towards the end of them kind of realizing that high school is coming to an end, life moves on, and so must they. But that doesn't mean that it's going to get in the way of what they've built over the 3 years. That is where the emotional impact lies, and even though it's not something that is so in your face as some other manga might be, it still is a very, very satisfying emotion. Thankfully, the Ludometer this week is a very easy 1 out of 10. As lewd as this manga gets is a couple of offhanded references to boobs. I'm pretty sure that the most the girls are ever in a state of undress is in their like PE bloomers. Good job, Azuma sensei. Now my wife won't kill me for reviewing this manga. Overall, I give this manga a very respectable 6 out of 10. This quantification doesn't really reflect my personal enjoyment of it. I love it unabashedly. I have already reread it since I read it to make this video, and it's just not what everyone else will like. The best way I can describe it is a little bit about myself. In the past, I grew up sneaking my mom's anthology of Calvin and Hobbes off of the top shelf in our house. She thought that I probably wasn't old enough to read it yet, and I probably wasn't, because it does have a lot of adult humor in it, not even in so much as lewd or something. It's just grown-up humor, even though it's coming from the mouth of a child. But Bill Watterson's masterful humor really just kind of shaped my own humor and my ongoing love for comic strips, comic books, and now manga. Him and Jim Davis's Garfield and many other Sunday comics I looked forward to reading, and I myself own the full collection of Calvin and Hobbes now. I love comic strips and I love what they have done over the years and were in the past. So for me, finding out about yonkoma and its influences from American comics in Japanese culture, especially so early as the late 1800s and even continuing on through the Great Wars and all of that stuff, it was really, really cool for me to read about all this stuff and then to see it continue on in Azumanga Daioh. It's all just been a wonderful experience for me, and it's felt like just a kind of a big nostalgia trip, which maybe is why I rate it so highly. But is that so bad? I don't think so. I highly recommend this manga to especially first-time readers, mainly because it bridges the gap, I think, between American comics and Japanese manga very well. It's short and digestible, around 57 chapters or 4 volumes. It's a very quick read, and despite its dated and distinctly Japanese jokes that are sometimes in it, the majority of it is translated very well over to English and lands just fine in your giggle box. I think that's all I really have to say about it. I know I was very rambly and probably a little bit more dry than I normally am. I'm very tired, but you know what? We're getting this video out this week. I'm Papadopoulos. Thank you all for watching, and I will see y'all next week. Bye.